Hello, everybody. Welcome to R&R, the meditation podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Burton, and this is...
My name's Ricardo Rowan.
Yeah, Ricardo and I are two spiritual brothers that have been practicing meditation for quite some time now, and we teach in different places. And on this show, we answer questions, live questions from the audience about some of the anything that they're going through in their meditation, different obstacles that come up for them, and really how to, in a way, settle more into the unfolding of the meditation and awakening process. But today, we're going to be talking about a specific topic that came up this week, and also we'll answer a participant question, a question that was sent in. And any live comments and questions as well, we'll take them during the show. But we wanted to touch on morality and ethics as a part of the spiritual path. This is something that apparently is not talked about so much anymore. People don't like the word morality. And so Ricardo, where do you think we are in this particular topic, and how do you want to start?
So when we talk about morality and spirituality, we have the basics of no killing, no lying, no stealing, all of it. And we all know this logically. But when it comes to our practice, do we know that on an experiential level? Do we really know what that means to be a moral person? There's snippets in our lives where we do lie, where we do cheat, where we do these things that cultivate negative karma. And how does that apply to your practice? When you start to practice meditation, there comes a time where you'll start to see this change. This change becomes not only a mental, but a character development that is necessary. You need to, not only that, you need to cultivate good karma. How do you cultivate good karma? Is part of your ethics and morals and conducts. And how important this is. There's a reason why in Buddhism, like I was telling you, Ryan, there's a reason why we have the Eightfold Path. And It's so simple, right? Well, right mindfulness, right speech, right thinking, all these things. And how little we kind of ignored it. I ignored it when I was younger. I was like, oh, it's just there. It's just there. It's going to come up. But it didn't start to do that for me until love and kindness started to sprout. So I don't know what's your experience with ethics, or let's get the conversation going. What is your sort of ideas on morals and ethics, and how does that apply in your practice?
Yeah, I think from my experience doing this and in my life, obviously there's right intention, there's right thought, there's right action, there's right speech. And the function of those aspects of the path is that they are a part of the purification of mind. So, if we're looking at flowers we're looking at seeds in a garden, and this seed is us, and when it sprouts, there's an awakening to our true nature, to the greater reality. The different aspects of the nutriment that go into that seed, the sunlight, the soil, the water, those things are essential for its sprouting and for it eventually to bear fruit. And that's how I see the Eightfold Path. That's how I see right action, right thought, right speech, right intention, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right concentration. They're all factors, they're all aspects that leads to purification of mind and eventually unfolding and awakening. So the thing with right speech and right action, we use the word morality, but I think a more modern way of using that word is like harmonious conduct, harmonious activity. A person that lives and operates from a place of harmony, as opposed to someone who operates from a place of disharmony, right? And
Right.
immorality. So
Mm.
this is
Yeah.
an important point in Buddhism, and even in all the contemplative traditions in general, because if we're constantly saying bad things, if we're constantly having bad intentions, if we're constantly doing engaging in harmful behaviors, we're continuing to create negative karma, which further keeps us in cyclical existence. Particularly, this is how the Buddhists see it, right? Your negative karmas are they're seeds that will come to fruition later. And right action, right thought, right speech, when it comes to meditation and purification of mind, it's just obvious. If you're saying negative things about people all the time, thinking negative things about people all the time, doing harmful things to yourself and other people, I mean, how is awakening even really on the table? If that's your orientation, there's so much clutter and junk really that's going to be in your mind that it's not really going to be able to settle. So
Right.
by cleaning up our conduct and by getting these different aspects of the Eightfold Path, by exploring them, by beginning to live them, we become more harmonious and our mind becomes more settled and organized. And then this culmination of the Eightfold Path, the seventh and eighth factors are right mindfulness and right concentration. You can't even get to right mindfulness and the perfection of concentration if if you're out of control as far as behavior is concerned. And yeah, and it's also beyond that. Like, it's beyond personal cultivation. It's just a matter of what's actually what's actually beneficial for yourself and for other people and for
Mm.
society.
Right. Because I do believe it is about serving. There's a deep aspect of your meditation that is also part of serving. It's serving yourself, it's serving your family, your society. And you bring up a good point. And again, I'll reiterate the fact that for me, when I've practiced this, it always came from love and kindness that it cultivated these sort of harmonious tendencies, harmonious conditions. And when I think about it, like with you, Ryan, with the way you interacted with your family and how they brought you up, in a lot of ways, there was a lot of love in your family. And it became so
Yeah,
instilled in you. Like there's qualities that you have growing up that you already had that were harmonious in different ways. And other people have that. You can tell, like, oh, they had a good family. They grew up in that sort of they had that natural cultivation of love and kindness, and they knew it became so natural with the respect and the virtues. But with other people, it's not there, and they may have a harder time meditating. Those those things come up in their minds, or like their actions come up, the feelings come up, the negative reactions, the negative programmings, and we all react to it. And in our meditation, you clearly see it. You clearly see it, and it's not till you start to, not only in your meditation where it starts to reprogram, but when you start to conduct that externally, how harmonious it'll be. It's so harmonious, and that's a good way to put it. You'll start to walk with grace, with gentleness once you start to cultivate this. And again, I only started doing this until I started to really focus on love and kindness, love and compassion, because it's the most, to me, it's the most non-dual thing. It's the most connecting thing you can do for a person and for yourself. Why are you going to hurt someone even if they have a different sort of religion, ideology? It doesn't matter in the unconditioned, the unborn. If you love someone, your natural tendencies are good. Your natural tendencies are great. You can have all the, like we were talking about yesterday. I know people that we both know. There's people out there that have great insight, great experience in meditation, but there's nothing here.
right. Even people I respect and have learned a lot from, for
Right.
sure.
And what does that bring up? You know?
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me wonder how it makes me think of how there's the awakening that we read of in the text and how those stories played out in the Buddhist time. And also when we look at the accounts of modern teachers and how that manifested in their lives. A couple of teachers that I really like, Jed McKenna and UG Krishnamurti, these two teachers like majorly influenced a lot of the unfolding for me and even how I teach meditation today. And they did not seem at all concerned with the heart center whatsoever. That just had no place in their teachings. Right. And it makes me wonder, even if you wake up, even if you have realization, if you didn't have parents that loved you, is that really going to be a factor in your teaching and in your unfoldment and in what you share? Because, a lot of this is, we read the text and we say, oh, it's supposed to be this way because that's what the texts say, of course. Yeah, you have to respect the text and the tradition or whatever. But when this unfoldment and awakening at whatever level starts to happen to people, it makes me wonder how much of the programming in the mind and the experiences that people have been through, how much that informs how they actually teach, despite the realization and awakening they've had. So, we have a great comment here. Eric, awesome. Ajahn Brahm talks a lot about how service to others leads to good meditation. The nimitta grows from service, but it's only apparent once you meditate. Yeah, same thing that I learned from my teachers in Thailand. They talked about how cultivating merits and doing good brightens the mind. It improves meditation. It facilitates awakening. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's, again, I feel like this is one of the most underrated things in a person's practice.
It is, because in non-duality, there's a kind of amorality that we find.
Right. And because it's, everything's so non-dual, it's total emptiness, or like it's I wouldn't say emptiness, it's just bleak. There's a bleakness to it. And when you start to do these services and you start to do these things, you start to really reflect in your practice. How is it not going to reflect your practice when you're doing good things? It's that simple. It's that simple. And again, for me, when I first was a monk at 19, you know what happened? My only focus was to cultivate and have a spiritual experience. I had this idea, I'm going to get my third eye open. That was my goal as a monk. There was no like, I want to cultivate my ethics, my morals, who I am as a person. There was no development right here. It was just, let me experience these things. And I was very attached, and how cut off I was here.
Right.
And I had deep meditations, 8 hours a day. That was no problem, but it's so limiting that you get to a point where there is a limitation, a threshold. And it's not until you get off, or once you start to practice love and kindness and these types of things, that you'll see how much your practices improve.
Yeah, I'll share a story from the canon, actually, and our favorite Brahmasana Kumara of the theist that's also mentioned the Theosophical Society and the Theosophical teachings. So in the Pali scriptures, I think it's in the Digha Nikaya, there's a sutta that talks about how the Buddha, in one of his former lives, he was a universal monarch. So that means he was a very exalted king basically of a world. And he had many, many, many wives and many, many servants and all kinds of incredible things. And he had learned from a Brahmin, like another cultivator, that he had heard this, that if you do the rains retreat, and on the rains retreat, you go into a place of solitude and you practice loving kindness, you practice, the Brahma Viharas, they're called that. That means the abodes of Brahma. Further transliteration would be the divine abidings. They are metta, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and compassion. So by practicing metta in a rains retreat, that whole rainy season, I think it's 3 or 4 months, at the end of it, this Brahma will appear, and the Brahma will grant you whatever you wish. And I'm sorry for all the Pali scholars if I'm missing some things here. You can correct me in the comments. So Brahma, at the end of this retreat, Buddha had done, or former Buddha in a past life, had done this practice of loving kindness. And at the end of it, at the end of the range retreat, the Brahma wasn't there. Brahma didn't appear, and he lets out this cry, "Oh, the Brahma has not appeared." And then the Brahma magically appears in the room and gives him a teaching and explains to him how the Brahma Viharas, these four qualities, and and using them as meditation objects, lead to rebirth in the Brahma world. They are a bridge to the Brahma world, and they produce wholesome qualities in the mind stream, and they can facilitate awakening. They lead to absorption. They lead to jhana. And Brahma Sanakumara proceeds to give him a discourse, and the discourse was mentioned things that cut a person off from the Brahma world, that cut a person off from that exalted existence, being reborn there and being able to go there. And he said it was the stench of avarice, the stench of greed, the stench of selfishness, the stench of stinginess. All these qualities that we have, that a lot of us have, and a lot of us have no problem exhibiting and just swimming in. They literally create an actual, to a Brahma, it's considered a stench. Those actual qualities, you could say are, Buddhism would call them defilements. Other paths would call them anti-divine, anti-divinity. The three poisons. These things pollute the mind stream. They lead to the generation of negative karma, and in that sutta specifically, they block you off from the Brahma world. So the sutta continues, and Buddha talks about how that life led to the practices in that life led to the Brahma world, but now the practices that he are teaching lead to total unbinding, the end of birth, and that was how he tied it into his current life as a teacher. And as we all know, the Brahma Viharas are taught in the commentaries. They're taught as meditation practices for the purpose of entering samadhi. So in a way, when people say love is a higher path, is a path to higher consciousness, there's scriptural evidence for that. When a person enters a samadhi because of loving kindness, that's a very refined state. That's a very that's an attainment. So yeah, I think what we find with many spiritual teachers, and even in some experiences that I've had, there's this very strong sense of presence. It's like the crown chakra is just boom, it's huge, but the heart center is not there. It's like there could be a lot of awareness, a lot of presence, or non-duality, but it doesn't seem like that loving connectivity, that compassion, or that loving kindness is there. And especially in the Mahayana tradition, Master Nanhua Chin has talked about how to really get Tao, to really realize the origin of nature and life, the heart center is opening the heart chakra is a necessity. So,
I mean, how many times in one's practice do you see negativity? How many times do you see your traumas and your woes and your reactions and all these things, and how much we fight back, we self-sabotage, and we react. We're in our desires, and we're just cultivating over and over and over again. And I get it, it's difficult, but just going over everything again, just to summarize it, like once you start to, even in your practice, once you start to even love those qualities, because they're not separate. There's a point to non-duality, even in what we view as negative thoughts, negative things. Once you start to even love those things, how those things start to diminish, those things start to wane. And an analogy I like to use is, we like to kind of go over Goenkas actually. Everyone has this golden statue of who we are, right? It's beautiful, golden. But the moment someone throws something at it, we start to react. We never want to flip it over. It's just a shadow. It's the shadow side. No one wants to see that. And that's thing that deserves more love and attention in terms of practice, I feel, for an individual. Then later on, you'll love both sides, but I think we deny ourselves of that. We want to pursue happiness, but it's the very thing that's cultivating our unhappiness, because we have this view of happiness as it's something that needs to be instilled right now in this very moment in this condition. But who says? Who gave you that idea? Why? Maybe you're supposed to feel suffering right now and love it, and go through the motion and learn and deal with the karmas of the past. But that takes time. That takes effort and practice. And that was such a great story because of the Brahmas even smelling the stench, even just a slight avarice. It's funny because I was talking to my friend right now, or recently. We were talking about how things today with social media and technology, a lot of people are convincing everyone, right? Or there's a lot of
Right.
these things going on. And you may even be talking to a friend, and you, even though you know and you're like, you respect your friend and all that, there's something in you, deep in you, that may want to manipulate or do these things and fight back and want them to be on your side. And those qualities start to grow. Those qualities start to almost it's like putting a drop of blood in water and watching the blood expand. Those things start to cultivate when you start to have these negative thoughts and have these negative pursuits and actions. So it's very important that these things you take care of it. You really watch for it, and you'll see how much you'll progress.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine, a monk friend, and he was asking me about. We were both monks at the time, and he was asking about jealousy. It's even on meditation retreats. I remember I did my first meditation retreat, and I sat next to this second meditation retreat. I sat next to this guy who could sit for 6 hours without moving, 8 hours without moving every day, like not just once, every single day. He sat for 8 hours without moving. Incredible. And I was so jealous. I was so jealous. And yeah, monk friend had asked me, what do you do? What are your thoughts on jealousy? And my immediate thought was, the only reason you're jealous is because you have this sense of being very important. You have this sense of wanting what that other person has. It's like, oh, they have that. Why can't I have it? You're still operating. It's from I. It's from this sense of me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's antidotes for that, right? Like having loving kindness for yourself, having loving kindness for the person that you're jealous of as well, that you're starting to harbor some negative intentions towards. But it's definitely, oh, I'm so this, but how come he has that?
Right.
You have a big idea of yourself. And when you see someone who has some greater capacity than you in any regard, it gets you a little flustered.
And
so
you're talking about specifically like the projection aspect of the mind, like I have this projection of, or like I'm supposed to be, I have this idea of what I look like, and I'm supposed to be better than him, or I can do that. And
yeah, like, look at this guy. I've been through so much more than him, and how come he gets all the goods? It's a me thing. It's really your sense of self is very solid in that moment. And I think the way to work with that, the way to work with some of these stenches, right, is to really apply mindfulness to them and to be present and observant. It'd be great if you're so present and you're so awake that stuff just dissolves upon arising. But if that's not the case, then we should look at what's arising in the mind and observe it and be present with it. And if we take actions based on those negative qualities, then of course we need to attempt to not do that.
Well, see, like when it comes to practice, even with me, from time to time, those like dark things arise, and it's okay. You know, it's perfectly fine that it's there, and that's another thing, being comfortable with it. You know, the moment that we react, either by hiding or pushing it away, is the moment that you give it power. Even like when I go hiking and I hear like my fire crew and like other members go like, oh, you know, just push it, like just push the pain, just like do all these things. I I always tell them, no, don't do that. Like you're reacting to it, you're giving it power, even though you may be going faster because of it. It's no matter what, you're tricking yourself. You're just tricking. For me, what arises is, yeah, it's there. It's fine. Like I feel like dying. This is hard, you know. But it's a part of it, and it's part of nature. It's part of life for those things to happen. Even looking at people having misconducts and greed and selfishness and all those what we consider negative qualities, those need more love and kindness than ever, like having love and kindness for those types of people, for those people that have those qualities. And it's upsetting that we like to judge and project and separate ourselves from them. And
Yeah,
it's go ahead.
yeah. It's I feel like that's one of the main utilities of non-duality. One of the main utilities of inseparability and living in that. There's no need to judge anyone anymore. You know, if you don't see yourself as particularly separate, and if there's no self and other, if you don't operate in that, if you don't live in that anymore, then how is it even possible to judge another
Right.
person?
Right.
So it just doesn't. It doesn't even arise. So you know whether it's of course it's debate whether non-duality is actually even awakening and enlightenment in some models. That's at least a very useful utility to it. You know, if there's no separation between awareness and what's arising in the mind stream, there's no duality in that, then there's not a sense of needing to escape from things. There's not a sense of needing to push things away or draw them to you. There's just this continuous flow of arising and passing.
Right.
But
Exactly.
that is, I feel that inseparability really can manifest through work on the heart center, through the Brahma Viharas, through loving kindness, through being of service. It reminds me of there's this cool book called Power of Eight by Lynn McTaggart. It's about manifestation and some of that new age stuff, and it's about healing as well. And Lynn found that you get these people together and you can all have one intention, manifest one thing in a person's life, or healing for a person or healing for yourself, and with the group collective consciousness, a lot of those things would come to fruition. And one of the things that she mentioned was when that wasn't working for a person, oftentimes what they wanted to manifest would happen when they got out of the way and they were able to expand their heart and their intention to someone else. It wasn't so much about them receiving, it was about everyone receiving. And for whatever reason, in the way that karma is calculated and the way that things arise and work, getting out of the way and not functioning from separateness, from ego, seemed to allow healings and manifestations to occur when they weren't occurring for these people in the test groups.
Right.
So.
And I kind of want to I want to see your opinion too about this, which is like going back to the self-help versus spirituality kind of.
Oh, I love this topic. This is great.
Now, when we talk about love and kindness in this sense with developing self-help or those types of qualities, for me, how I view it is, yeah, you're trying to cultivate happiness, being a better person, manifesting, trying to do all these things, but it's not. I feel like it's not solidified. There's not a real. It doesn't feel like it's real, you know. It doesn't feel real to me. Even the way I hear people speak about self help and things like that. It doesn't feel, there's no validity behind it. It's just spewing out words without the actual experience of love and the experience of happiness and experiencing of actually manifesting. And so, how I view this is self-help. Yes, it's a start to progress into deep spiritual practice. But if you want to go into deep spiritual practice, the only difference is the happiness that you're trying to find isn't the way it's projected out to it's not an egoic thing. It's not trying to alter your personality.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that refining your character and developing wholesome qualities in the mind, that's definitely a part of many paths, and that does fit into the self-help model, like refining your character, developing more skills. There's actually even suttas in Buddhism about how to preserve your wealth. One of the tenets was actually about increasing competency in specific skill, and not gambling your money away. So there's wisdom when it comes to this, and of course there's wisdom in self-help and in a lot of these teachings. But the main difference is that self-help is just that. You're helping yourself. It's not called self-transcendence or self-realization. It's called self-help, right? That entire field of getting motivated and improving our lives and creating better conditions, and that all has its place. See, I'm not against self-help. We just have to see what the differences are. Like self-help is about changing conditions, improving conditions, and creating a better life for yourself. And you can use Dharma for that, right? But that's not necessarily the goal of Path. I would say the goal of Path has much more to do with greater reality, realization, transcendence, whatever word you want to put on it, right? Enlightenment. But self-help really is predicated around the notion of self and our self in this relative dimension, the life that we live, the job that we have, the people in our lives. And there's very much so a sense of realness and solidity to all of that in self-help. The difference is that in Dharma, the solidity goes out the door, right? When we talk about guys like Papaji, the title of the book is Nothing Ever Happened. My whole life, nothing ever happened, right? So this sort of thing, people in self-help communities are not, I feel that they're uncomfortable with the idea of selflessness. They're uncomfortable with the idea of no agency. They're uncomfortable with egolessness, with letting go in some ways. But that's because the goal of self-help is not the goal of self-realization. The goal of self-help is not the goal of Path. These are different animals. So I think if you want to make more money, if you want a better relationship, if you want to improve your conditions, you do the things that are prescribed in self-help. And if that's not working out, make some more merits, learn some stuff from Dharma, because Dharma talks about how a lot of all the conditions in our lives are related to karma and merits, and cultivating good and purifying our minds as a way to change our fate and change our reality. But see, this is the very thing. It's about change. Mm-hmm. And the ultimate in Buddhism and in many of these paths is the changeless. It's the thing that doesn't change. It's the unborn. So you could change and modify yourself and improve conditions as much as you want, and put in as much effort as you want, and make your life as great as it can be, and make as much money as you want, and gain as much influence as you want. But that's not necessarily going to lead to realization. This is the thing. Like, I remember our good friend Nick was like, "Why don't you listen to all these, self-help gurus and all these multi-millionaires and billionaires and read their books and stuff?" And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I have respect for people like that, but they're not gurus. They're not masters. Like, I get that they're obviously the most efficient people in the world, obviously the most efficient people on the planet. But their type of wisdom is not necessarily at all the wisdom that leads to Path and fruit.
Right.
So.
Yeah, everything you said on point. I 100% agree.
I love self-help, man. I love it, but it's all about self. Right. So, and if we're looking at Buddhism, we're looking at the notion of anatta, I think the stories you shared with me recently about healers and
Oh my God.
spiritually developed people that just gets wrapped up in ego. And I feel that anatta is the realization and understanding of no self is so helpful for
It's
that.
yeah, it's important, yeah, for your practice. And the reason why, like, just to explain to the audience, if you're interested in like finding a healer, or like, you know, you need some sort of thing like that, or a meditation teacher, they will always be in a state of compassion, and there's no idea of them being sort of like, I am the healer, and it doesn't lead to an ego. There's many folks like this, unfortunately, where like, oh yeah, I'm a healer, I'm the one facilitating the healing, I'm
It's
the
me.
one. Yeah. And what that actually does something, again, like what I was saying before, when you have little snippets of these tendencies and these programs, and you feed it unconsciously or consciously, it grows. And it's important to be self-aware of that, and be self-aware of what's out there too, with healers or teachers where they have those types of tendencies. And it's all about self, and who, when really it's not about self, and you're not the one doing the healing, so to speak.
Yeah, I had a guest on named Ron Schlegel, and he has a relation. He's a follower of Meher Baba, and so every time he does a Psych K session and a therapy session, he prays, he connects with Baba. He says, Baba, guide me. May the right things come forth from my mouth, and may this person be healed. And he said the whole therapy session is really just him staying out of the way. It's like the thing, it'll be the energy and the words and the whole thing. His hands are off the wheel, it's coming through. And then like the ego, the personality will creep in, and then he just has to relax and
Yes.
still and continue to let
Yes.
Baba do
Yes.
what he
How many
does.
times? How many times
So
does the ego get in your way? You know,
yeah,
just like it just creeps up, and it's like it absolutely annihilates what you're trying to achieve or do. And so it's funny. Do we have any questions, by the way?
yeah. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put
Yeah.
them in the comment section. And Eric, thank you very much for the comments you made on our last week's R&R. For some reason, um, it was blocked on YouTube, and we
YouTube.
weren't able to. We weren't able to respond to Eric's comments. But I wanted to say, thank you for watching our show, and your comments were great. We couldn't even access the comments; I could just see them, but I would go to the video, and they weren't there. So thank you very much. And if we're not friends on Facebook, please add Ricardo or I, because if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to us directly. So.
My favorite quote on love and kindness will always be, or one of them will always be, Corinthians. And if no one's, if I know generally we speak about Buddhism, but just to talk about the Bible, for
Yeah,
me,
absolutely.
in Corinthians, it talks about how love is supposed to be, and the way it's described, and the analogies and metaphors used in it is so good. It's so good. I can't. I wish I knew it by heart, but I don't. But all one part is, it's like, you may. This is summarizing it. I'm not. Just one little section. You can know. You can know Dharma, basically. You can know the teachings. You can know and say it and preach it. But if you don't have love in your heart, it's like a resounding gong. It just goes and then dissipates. It just loses its value. It doesn't. There's nothing behind it.
Yeah, basically, what is it worth? What is it worth to gain the world if you've lost your soul, and what is it worth if you've gained so much but you have no love for anyone?
Yeah.
So, question: does a Buddha have an ego? Basically, does a human being have an ego to exist on Earth? Great question. Um, to be clear and honest, I really don't know the answer to that. I have my suspicions, but if we're going by the traditional Theravadan Buddhist perspective on this particular thing, of course, the Buddha was an arahant, so he did not. He extinguished his ego, and not extinguished the ego was never there to begin with, and the Buddha realized that, and the full realization of that is arahantship, and that realization leads to the end of suffering and parinibbana. So from the Theravadan point of view, of course, Buddha doesn't have, arahant doesn't have any sense of self, and therefore cannot have a sense of ego. My personal opinion, to be clear and to diverge from the doctrinal opinion, is that it seems that you would think that to be able to function in the relative dimension and to function in physical reality, that you would have some impulses to eat, to drink, to teach Dharma, to share, to do whatever. So in that sense, of course, there's desire to do that. There could be desire to walk to the other side of the room, but that's different than craving. And I think what usually we're referring to in spiritual discussions is ego and craving, a strong desire coming from a very solid sense of self. And it seems that as a person spiritually awakens, there's less and less and less of that. Absolutely. But yeah, there's a lot of people I've heard who say, if you had absolutely no ego, you would completely realize the supreme, or you would realize the absolute, and you just die on the spot. That would, you have no reason for continuing your existence. You would just blow out like a flame, or you would be like a flame blowing out. A lot of people, I've heard many teachers use examples like this. I don't know if it's actually true or not.
Yeah.
But
same thing.
Good question, by the way, Eric. What do you think, Ricardo?
Yeah, same thing. This is just me talking and my opinion. And so I think if for an enlightened being to have an ego still, I think they're, like you were saying, Ryan, I think their desires are not, there's no human desires, basically. Those things aren't there. They still have to work in circumstances. They're still working in conditions, and they're still here in this type of reality. But there's none of those structures interfering with their daily lives. As with us, we have those structures and we have those conditions where we don't understand the objectivity of things. So I just think it could be a more it's just a very refined state of, it could be a refined ego to the point where it's so they can sustain themselves in this reality, so to speak.
Yeah, it makes me think of a particular analogy about when a person starts to awaken. They have let's say, before a person starts meditating, they're just like 100% operating from individuality, 100% operating from ego, stories, desires, time, space, form, all of the stuff that's related to the material dimension and things that are related to the mind. You really see all that as me. At some point in a person's unfolding, in a person's practice, there's an awakening that happens to a deeper nature. And, some people call that the transcendent, some people call that Brahma, some people call that the higher self, some people call that just awakening. And it's like you start to have, suddenly at first you were at 100%, and then boom, it changes, and you're now at you're in this 50% awakened consciousness, or you're in this 50% place of presence, and you're not functioning so much from ego anymore. It's possible that if that was to be blown out to 98% transcendent consciousness, or 98% awakenedness, that it would be, you'd have no reason to exist in the material dimension anymore. You wouldn't have an urge to really get up and do anything. So that may be a possibility. I just don't know if it's actually the case. So what was it? There was one specific point going back to self-help. And in self-help and generally in our culture, there's this notion that we need purpose, we need dreams, we need desires, we need goals, we need time, we need other people, we need so many things to keep going. And that's the very point. There are things that we need to keep going. And what is it that continues to keep going? You are the thing that continues to keep going. The ego, your sense of self, is what continues to keep going. So all the stuff that's in self-help that makes the ego stronger, that's necessary. That's what helps in the material dimension to change circumstances and conditions. But they're actually what are keeping consciousness. It's what's keeping your nature in time and in form. It is literally what's keeping you going. So if you just, for even 3 days, I don't know, a week, like all of your dreams and all of your accomplishments and everything you had and everything you held dear to just vanished, you'd be in this abyss, this absolute emptiness, just absolute abysmal suffering. And in my opinion, on the other side of that abyss is awakening, because it's those things that keep you going. And once that you has vanished and that you is out of the way, literally, so many teachers say that the individual self is the obstacle. It is the veil that obstructs, that covers our awakened nature. So,
is there a question?
There's a comment. Brahm claims that if one becomes enlightened, they have a few days to ordain as a monk, or they will die. Or he says exit the body. Oh, does using the D word cause problems? Does saying that cause issues for the algorithms?
The DIE?
Yes.
I don't think so.
You sure?
I don't know.
Okay, anyways. Well, we're not familiar with this stuff. If anyone here is, please let us know. Yeah, that's a classic teaching, or that's a classic tenet in the Pali Canon, that if a person is an anagami and they realize arahantship, they have a few days to ordain before they die or something happens.
I've heard that.
Have no idea if it's true, to be honest. But yes, it is. Of course, that is a teaching that's held as true in Theravada, for sure.
Yeah. So before we wrap things up, what kind of advice would you give to people in terms of love and kindness in practice?
I think in a time like right now, there's a lot of fear going on. There's a lot happening in the world, a lot of uncertainty with the pandemic and with everything else that's happening in this country and in other places, irrespective of what side of the debate you're on. I think that this cultural divide and the hatred that is coming from it, from both sides of the debate and both sides of the issue, is really not helping. It reminds me of when John had mentioned that Bible quote, really, about what's the use of love if you only love the people that love you? What's the use of love if you only love those that are dear to you? Love your enemies. That's such an important thing for this time, because there's so much division. And I have friends that have political differences from that. We just have different views on things, and I love them no matter what. And I listen, and we talk, and we communicate, and we share ideas. And I think that when we're coming from a place of love, it just reminds me of that other story. Of course, it happened in your life when you went to see John and you told him, "Hey, John, I want to become this like spiritual warrior and fight the dark side." And he told you that hatred in your heart, it helps the other side. Yeah, exactly. Like all this hatred that's just being fomented by social media. No one's thinking of what the karmic and energetic consequence of that. What is the consequence of that? You think that all of that energy just goes nowhere, it just vanishes into thin air?
And it's like you think that because I'm behind a screen, no one's watching. But really, there's always someone watching, in terms of the more esoteric sense of things. So yeah, I think that was much needed. I love that. Yeah, I to kind of go with your point, political differences, ideologies, feelings, emotions, all these things. Right now, everyone's opposing each other for these things that are meaningless, so to speak. They're not. They're not the real. They're not the real essence to why we're upset and to why there is. There's something deeper, and we can connect to that. And I find that love and kindness just bridges that gap. Or even just who cares about, even if you don't, if you can't feel love and kindness, that's fine. Just understanding. Just, yeah, oh, you have this idea, that's fine. Let me understand that. Let me try to understand that point of view. Whether it doesn't matter what side you're on. Even those that don't have a side, you still get hatred because you have to choose a side, which is wrong. And so, I think for right
I
now,
agree.
if it's almost like if you can't even understand yourself, how are you gonna, like, we're trying so hard to better societal structures, uh, and trying to build an external community that we just are blinded to our own internal selves of our internal love and kindness. We forget that. We really forget about that. We're like, oh yeah, we'll make society better first for me before before my heart chakra or whatever. So
I need
we really,
healing. I need society to provide it for me. Please help. It's like
exactly.
I get it. I get it. I understand. For
But
sure, of course, people are having a super difficult time this year. So many people have lost jobs. Store businesses have closed. This has been a terrible year in a lot of ways. It's just absolutely abysmal. Despite that, we still should rest in love and in clarity and do the best that we can in that regard. And I was talking to someone about this earlier, but the Ramana Maharshi was asked about how he could just sit on Arunachala as all these wars are happening across the world and all this conflict that's happening and famine and poverty, and how he could just be in peace in this mountain. And he said his response was, there's no difference between him and the world, and no difference between him and the world and the supreme reality. And this is just the unfolding of karma, the unfolding of specific conditions, and just another place in the cycle. And from a very omniscient point of view, there are laws and karmas and things in place that are so perfected in how those fruits come to manifestation. What we think may be a very bad thing can actually be a very good thing. It's unfortunate that so many, of course, tons of people died in World War I and World War II. And that may have been the collective karma necessary for massive technological advancement to happen that lifted millions of people out of poverty the decades that followed. So what can be really good for a person could actually be bad. What could seem bad could be the best thing that ever happened in your life. And this could have been the hardest year you've ever had, but 2021 could be the best year you've ever had. So it's relative, and things are changing, of course, but coming from a place of love and being that love is how we can all contribute to the collective change and transformation. Maharshi said, a sage awakening, a person being established in this state, the essence, the energy, the vibration is so high that its effects are felt. Its effects are unfathomable. Right? So we look at these sages and we look at these people that just purify their minds and meditate, and we think they're selfish. And in the unseen, you have no idea how valuable they are and how much they contribute to the world. Yeah, and
no,
by all means, that was not at all word for word verbatim what Maharshi said. We can get the direct quote next
but
time.
no,
But
but that was I think that's a beautiful way to end things, Ryan,
yeah.
because I think I have nothing else to say after that. I really don't.
Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in to this week's R&R. We decided to have it today on the planetary alignment, even though it's usually on Sundays. We didn't touch on the planetary alignment at all. a clickbaity title. We just wanted everyone to tune in and watch this episode. We don't know anything. I don't know anything about planetary alignments, about Vedic astrology, or any of that. But it was wonderful having everyone in, listening to the chat. We'll see all of you next week. And if you have any questions, feel free to message us. Take care.
Again, my Instagram is at the Millennial Monk. My website is themillennialmonk.me. So if you guys want to check it out, go for it. No rush. Do what you feel is right.
Yeah, well, I'll post Ricardo's website right here in the comments section. And if anyone wants to find me, you could find me at ryanjburton.com or just message me here on Facebook. So, all right, everyone, take care. And Ricardo, thank you.
Guys.